Hiya! Welcome to LSB Feasters Radio Channel, where we keep great radio from the past alive. Today, we are going to Boston and the Dean of Talk Radio. I'm talking about Jerry Williams. Jerry spent most of his life on the radio doing talk radio, rabble-rousing, and just pretty much stirring the pot. Jerry came to Boston from WIBG in Philadelphia in the late 1950s to go to work at WMEX. He spent many years there until he got the call to go to Chicago. And he went to WBBM, where he did talk radio for a short period till the station flipped format to all news. He went back to Boston and then spent many years on WBZ. After he left WBZ, he had to deal with a non-compete, so he spent some time in Hartford and Philadelphia, but he came back to Boston and he spent many years on WRKO. Jerry was really good at what he did, and I'm telling you, he did not mind stirring things up one bit. If you haven't heard the Dean of Talk Radio, check him out. It's Jerry Williams on WBZ Boston.
A physician, slightly more than 5,000 are career officers. Meanwhile, the White House is caught in a bind with President Nixon's wage price freeze on one side and the congressionally approved military pay raise on the other. In the 2-year draft extension bill approved by Congress today, the military would bathe in the largest pay raise in history effective October 1st. This poses a problem since the starting date is within the 90-day freeze. The pay package is geared to attract an all-volunteer army and raise salaries for all ranks. The United Nations elected Indonesia's Foreign Minister Adam Malik president of the 26th session of the General Assembly today. Malik, who received 119 of the 125 secret votes cast, will succeed Norway's Edvard Hamro. RWBZ News Time, 2 minutes after 11.
When I get tired of t-shirts and dungarees and that whole funky scene, I need something more elegant, and that's when I need Down with Louise, a great new shop for elegant clothes. Down with Louise, 'cause elegance is the way it's going, and the people at Louis have a way of knowing how a great look can cost less. It's Down with Louis.
Down with Louis, the new boutique for men at Louis' lower level. A brave new world of fashion ideas guaranteed to cheer the spirit and spare the pocketbook of the contemporary male. Down with Louis, at Louis, 470 Boylston Street, Boston.
Down with Louis, 'cause elegance is the way it's going. Down with Louis, down with Louis, down with Louis, down with...
Firemen are battling a 3-alarm blaze at the old Notre Dame Academy on Lower Washington Street in Roxbury. Fire officials say the large complex of abandoned attached buildings was fully involved in the spectacular blaze which sent flames leaping through the roof. Ambulances have been called to the scene on a standby basis, although the multi-story brick building is not occupied. Throughout France, there are reports that something unusual is going on in communist China. We'll call in Group W's Bernard Redmond for a report from Paris.
Is Mao dead? Nobody in France really knows for sure. The French radio and the French news agency are speculating that something unusual is going on in communist China, and it may be the serious illness or the death of Mao. No French source has issued a report that Mao is actually dead, but rumors have a way of spreading based on a purely speculative report and circumstantial evidence. A few facts are known. The traditional giant October 1 parade in Peking has been canceled. That hasn't happened for 21 years, and Hong Kong observers think that only a major event like Mao's absence could justify it. Secondly, Chinese civil aviation flights have been canceled for a period of days. The French news agency has also reported that 2 American heart specialists, including Dr. Paul White, who used to treat the late President Eisenhower, left Hong Kong for Peking. The French TV news tonight opened with a film clip of Mao and some vague speculation. The French think Mao could have suffered a heart attack or perhaps is dying or dead. But they also suggest that some less dramatic explanations may be forthcoming for the strange series of events now being noted in China. This is Bernard Redmond, Group W News, Paris.
In sports, in American League Baseball, Boston defeated Detroit Lions 3-2. That game took 10 innings. Baltimore 5, the Yankees nothing. Milwaukee beat Minnesota 4-2. Washington 9, Cleveland 1. After 7 innings, the White Sox 2, Oakland nothing. Kansas City at California just starting. In the National League, Houston 3, San Francisco 1. Cincinnati dropped Los Angeles 9-3. The Cubs 3, the Mets nothing. The first of a pair, Philadelphia 5, Montreal 4. The second game, Montreal 4, Philadelphia nothing. Atlanta beat San Diego 5-2, and after 5 innings, St. Louis 4. St. Louis and Pittsburgh are tied 4 each. For Boston and vicinity, for the rest of the night, clear with low temperatures in the 40s for the interior, the low 50s along the coast. On Wednesday, sunny. The highs will be around 70 with northeast winds around 10 to 15 miles an hour. Wednesday night, clear and cool. The low temperatures will be around 50. On Thursday, mostly sunny. The highs will be in the 70s. Right now in Boston, 56 degrees. And that's the 11 o'clock WBZ report with portions recorded. I'm Maurice Lewis for WBZ News. We now present a WBZ editorial by our General Manager, Cy Yanoff.
There are many obstacles to providing decent new housing at reasonable prices, and some of them are cemented right into our complex, confused, outdated building codes. At present, building standards vary from community to community. Many of these regulations have been adopted on grounds of public safety. But in fact, some have been used to prevent the use of new materials and new mass production methods, things that can really bring building costs down. This code problem has been forcefully pointed out by special commissions at both the state and national levels since the mid-1960s. It's time for a legal overhaul, and House Bill 5999 is the way to provide it. In brief, House 5999 would establish a new state building code commission within the Department of Community Affairs. This blue ribbon group would then draw up a uniform state code that would become mandatory for all cities and towns. The state would control training and certification of inspectors, but the actual work would be done by local officials. The code bill has bipartisan support and some top-level backing, and still it's had rough going. One reason is that some lawmakers want to have their say on the new code, so there have been efforts to water down the bill. Last week, the House Ways and Means Committee proposed simply dumping it into a study. That move was defeated, but the future is still very much in doubt. It's been estimated that modern codes could cut building costs up to 15%. With today's housing and financial crises, it's a crime to deny people savings of that sort. Passage of House 5999 is a must.
That's WBZ's editorial position, and we recognize our obligation to broadcast opinions that don't agree with ours. At 8½ minutes past 11, it's back to the final portion of tonight's Jerry Williams program and his special guests.
254-5678.
Hello, America. This is Jerry Williams. Welcome back. It's the fourth and final hour as WBZ celebrates its 50th anniversary. We're doing that all this week, as a matter of fact. And to celebrate, we've been talking to the many stars of the golden era of radio. Last night, Jerry Colonna, Jimmy Wallington, Don Wilson, Rudy Valley, Red Barber, Bill Stern, among others. Tonight, we've talked to Hal Perry, the great Gildersleeve, John McCarthy, who played the Green Hornet for 7 years, Santos Ortega, who played Nero Wolfe in 1,000 other roles and is now doing commercials. He plays Grandpa on As the World Turns. Buffalo Bob Smith, Art Linkletter tonight. We spoke to Minerva Pius, who was in Allen's Alley as Mrs. Nussbaum. Sorry we couldn't make contact with Kenny Delmore or Bill Conrad tonight. You just heard Bob Hope. And now we're going to introduce the star of The Lucy Show and so many great radio programs, Armis Brooks, Fibber McGee, and others, Gail Gordon. Gail, how are you?
Fine, Jerry. How are you?
Nice to talk to you.
Well, it's a great pleasure for me to talk to you.
In radio, you began when, Gail?
Well, 1926, as a matter of fact.
1926?
Yes.
Well, I think, I don't know of anybody we've talked to who's been on the air in an earlier period, maybe with the exception of Jimmy Wallington.
Oh, yeah.
1926, what were they doing? What were you doing?
I almost killed radio before it really had a chance to start.
Uh-huh.
A friend of mine came to me and said there was a radio station at KFWB down here on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood.
Now owned by Westinghouse.
Yes. And they were just picking people off the streets to go on this new medium that they were trying to get started, and asked me if I could do something. And I knew about 4 chords on a ukulele, and I went on a radio program for about 5 minutes singing It Ain't Going to Rain No More, accompanying myself on the ukulele, and almost killed radio right then before it had a chance to start.
And a fantastic career unfolded from a ukulele and It Ain't Gonna Rain No More, No More. At KFWB, you'd be surprised the amount of people we talked to who are and were successful announcers who began as singers.
Yes.
Because obviously, what else was there to do but sing on radio at that time?
That's right, yeah.
And from there, what happened?
Well, I didn't get started in a radio career doing that, as I say. It was some years later that I really went into radio, doing a series called English Coronets out here on the coast. Life of Henry VIII, of Charles II, Elizabeth and Essex, and all those things, written by a woman here named Kay Van Riper, and that sort of started me in radio, and then doing anonymous parts on other shows like Lux Radio Theater and things like that. I was on many of those things, and we used to go from one show to another. If we were lucky, maybe do 2 a day, and sometimes 3 on a day, 3 different shows. Being radio, if you could disguise your voice a bit, well, then you could do a number of parts on a number of different shows. So, and we got about $3 or $4 per show in those days, so you had to do 2 or 3 to make a living.
Did you get to know Cecil?
But the sort of work I did on radio for quite a number of years.
Did you get to know Cecil B. DeMille?
I worked with him. Nobody on the show in the category that I was, which was anonymous actor just brought in to do parts. I never really got to talk to him. He was only there a couple of hours on the day we did the show.
That was the big dramatic show of the day, wasn't it?
Oh, yes. Yes, I worked with a lot of big stars on that. They used to do adaptations of pictures, and they'd get the stars from the pictures to do their parts in the adaptation, and they'd get the local radio actors to do the other parts, and I was one of the great mass of unknown people who sometimes did very good parts on the shows, but we didn't get credit for them in those days. Nobody knew who we were, and we were very happy just to be able to be on that show, which, as I remember, paid something like $50, which was a lot of money, and we were all very grateful to be on it.
Gail, was that Monday night at 9 o'clock?
I believe it was. I think Monday night at 9, the Lux Radio Theater was...
I remember how much I look forward to listening to that every week, especially the movie adaptations.
Yeah.
Particularly if I had seen the movie. I was interested in hearing what the Lux Radio Theater was going to do with it, and I recognized some of the dialogue. It was always very exciting to hear for some reason.
Yes, they were very well done. They were very well written and well produced, and it was a tremendously popular show.
What was the big break for Gale Gordon?
Well, I think Fibber, McGee, and Molly. I had done all kinds of parts on different radio shows, and finally I got a chance to be on the Fibber McGee show, doing a one-shot appearance as Molly's ex-boyfriend who had made good, and she was trying to put on a show for him, and Great Gildersleeve acted as her butler, and so forth, and so on. And they seemed to like the way I did things, and then Don Quinn, who wrote the show, decided to create a mayor for Wistful Vista, and I was the one, Mayor Latrivia of Wistful Vista, and he wrote these wonderful alliterations where I'd stumble over a word and try to make it better, and harder I tried to make it better, the worse it would get. And then finally I'd blow up at McGee, and that was the gimmick in the part of Mail the Trivia. Well, from that time on, I was with them for 13 years, and people started casting me as the blow-up guy, the man who loses his temper and so forth. And that really started me on the sort of characters I've been doing ever since.
Gail, that Fibber McGee and Molly show was very literate comedy. I think Fibber McGee and the Fred Allen style of comedy was quite literate for its day.
Yeah.
When most comedy in the visual sense was sort of slapstick, if you remember the early days of movies.
Yeah.
There wasn't much what I would call literate comedy around.
That's right.
But Fibber McGee and Molly evidently got away with it and did it, and people liked it, and so did Fred Allen.
Yes, that's very true. It was, of course, you had to depend entirely on the spoken word, and so I think it demanded a little more comedy in the actual writing than we do have in television, where you can take a situation and develop it visually without having to say very much.
Now, I always felt that Fibber McGee was an adult comedy program rather than kid-oriented.
Yes, and yet a surprising number of kids who used to enjoy it and watch it. There were little cliches that they used that the kids picked up and used a great deal. And, of course, the closet, Fibber McGee's closet, was a classic thing. And nobody ever saw it, but you heard it. And then you used your own imagination to build up what the closet might look like.
It was quite a closet.
It sure was.
Somewhat like Jack Benny's vault.
Yes.
You know, there are things in radio that remain 30 or 40 years later. In my mind, I'm sure in the minds of many hundreds of thousands of others, Jack Benny's vault and Fibber McGee's closet.
That's right.
How long did you do the mayor?
13 years.
And then?
From that, I went into a radio show called Our Miss Brooks. There were other things in between. I used to do a character on the Burns and Allen show, and a number of other shows I did parts on. But Our Miss Brooks was a summer replacement, and went into that, and they sort of cast it with an eye to the possibility of television. Well, it was very successful. Instead of just going on for 13 weeks in the summer, it went on and was renewed, and we were 4 years on the air before we went into television. Then when we did switch over, the only change that was made was Professor Boynton was played by Bob Rockwell on TV, and Jeff Chandler was the original Mr. Boynton on the radio, but he had, in the meantime, become a big movie star, and they wouldn't allow him to go into television. They had a contract with for his exclusive services. So that was the only change that was made when we went over into the television media, and we went on for another 5 years in television. So that was a 9-year job.
And Eve Arden will always be our Miss Brooks.
Yes.
No matter. There'll never be another our Miss Brooks.
No, she was very, very great. She was just wonderful, and a wonderful person, too.
Gail, I'm going to take a short break. Will you stay with us, please?
I would love to.
Gale Gordon, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll return to him in just a moment.
Flair writes smooth.
Flair is tough.
Flair, 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 Flair. Ooh, Flair writes smooth.
Flair is tough.
Flair, Flair, Flair.
Get into show business with Flair, the pen that shows exactly how you feel. Because Flair comes filled with more than ink. Flair comes filled with love, joy, happiness, fun. Old-fashioned pens write words. Flair writes feelings. Flair, now playing at your favorite store with a cast of 12 emotionally involved colors.
Ooh, Flair writes smooth.
Flair is tough.
Flair, Flair, Flair. With the smooth,
Tough.
nylon point, it's the only way to write. Flair, Flair, Flair.
It's BZ's 50th anniversary. We're talking to Gale Gordon, and we'll return to him in a moment. Millbrook Motors has the guts to see you through. Jeep Guts. Millbrook Motors, the place to see the whole line of Jeep vehicles for 72. Jeep four-wheel drive is the original and still unbeaten. Only a Jeep dealership like Millbrook Motors has a full line of four-wheel drive vehicles. The original CJ5 Jeep, the Jeep Wagoneer, station room comfort and rugged four-wheel drive capability, the new Jeep Commando, the fun first cousin of the CJ5 Jeep, and the Jeep Truck, the only four-wheel drive pickup truck that was specifically built to be a four-wheel drive pickup. Get out to Millbrook Motors, get set for hunting, skiing, camping, the active, gutsy life. Millbrook Motors, 1474 Tremont Street, Duxbury. They operate on guts, Jeep guts. Now back to California. Gail Gordon, star of Armis Brooks, Fibber McGee and Molly, and of course the Lucy Show. Gail, I asked Hal Perry this question earlier of having to have lived with one character all of his adult life. How do you feel having to do the slow burn all of your adult life?
Well, I look at it this way. As long as people will pay me to blow up and get angry, I will be happy to blow up and get angry. I know a lot of performers like to do other things, and I would too. I'd like to play something different. But I'm certainly not going to downgrade a character that has kept the wolf from the door very, very pleasantly for me and my wife for a number of years. And I'll go on blowing up as long as they will accept it.
Some people feel that, again, they'd like to expand into other things.
Oh, yes, that's natural. Any performer wants to do different things. I'd like to do a psychopathic killer or a Western heavy. I think it would be wonderful to do
I think
those
you'd make
things,
a great Western heavy.
Pardon?
I think you'd make a great Western heavy.
Well, I'd love to do it, put a beard on and be real nasty and, a killer or something like that. But, as I say, I'm not pining away to do something like that. I would like to do it, but I'm very, very happy doing these sort of egotistical blow-up type of characters, and if they amuse people, that's better still. I think we need laughter in the world, and I'm delighted to be doing this sort of thing, particularly with Lucy, who is just wonderful, a woman I admire tremendously for her ability, for her personality, for everything about her. She's just great, and I'm very, very happy. And if I can go on snarling and screaming at her for years, I'll be very, very happy too.
I can imagine what some director would obviously think if he hired Gale Gordon to do a psychopathic killer. In the midst of it, you'd be doing the slow burn. They'd be asking you, or audiences would say, any minute he's going to do it, you watch.
Yes, that is true. And yet, until I did Fibber McGee and Molly for many, many years, I did heavies, I did leading men, I did character parts. I very rarely did comedy parts at all. So I know that I started out in the business as a very young man doing a character part in a play called Seventh Heaven. I love to do characters, and always have. I've never fancied myself as a leading man. I knew I never would be one. I'm not the pretty boy type by any means. But I decided very early in my career that if I could get to be a good character man, they're always working. The leading men aren't always working. If there isn't a leading man part, or they feel that they're too good to drop down to doing a character part, they're kind of out of luck. But a character man, there's always a demand for them, and I'm very grateful that I've been accepted as a character man for all these years, and I hope I just go on that way.
Gail, back in the days of radio, is there some one or two experiences that stand out in your mind, or some one or two people that you met back in those days who had an influence upon your life and career?
Well, that's kind of a hard question to answer. I would say, obviously, that the association with Fibber McGee and Molly had a great deal of influence on my subsequent career, because that's when I started doing, was being called to do comedy parts, and the egotistical bosses who scream at everybody and so forth and so on. So that did have an influence on my career. Other things, I would say my early training in the theater had a great deal to do with that, with the influences on my later life. I learned a great deal as a very young man, being in the theater at $15 a week, not having a word to say, just being atmosphere in my first play with Richard Bennett. But I learned so much that convinced me that good character men were in demand always, and that would be the thing to sort of shoot for.
And many of those programs in early radio were done live, weren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Well, they weren't pre-taped, they weren't pre-recorded.
No.
Were there any goofs you made in those days?
Oh, yes, there were many goofs. Some of them you can't repeat because they sound a little suggestive, because they're... One thing that happened to me, we were doing a detective cops and robbers show, and I was playing a heavy, as it happened. And there was a scene where I've been cornered, and the siren, the police siren sounds, and the policeman comes in and arrests the heavy and takes him away. And, of course, in those days, nearly every time they had a policeman, he was always Irish, so you knew that the brogue meant that he was a policeman. And we got doing the scene, the sound man noticed that the man doing the policeman wasn't in the studio. This is while we were on the air, and he went out looking for him. Well, in the meantime, the cue came for the siren and for the police car to come in. Well, I imitated the siren. I saw the sound man wasn't there, and somebody opened the door to give the sound of the car door opening, and I played the policeman. I arrested myself, took myself back to the car, and then did the siren fading out into the distance.
Just like television.
Not quite. Not quite. But those sort of things happen all the time in radio. So, and if people would double up a part, if somebody went out of the room, out of the studio for a minute, or missed their cue, somebody else would jump in and do the lines and imitate the voice as much as possible. And nobody listening really ever knew that anything went wrong. It happened many, many times.
Well, I suppose that Lucy show is just going to go on forever.
Well, I think it'll go on as long as she wants to go on, because she's very, very, very popular. She's a brilliant gal, and she's a perfectionist. We worked very, very hard doing the show. We rehearsed till after 6 tonight, and but she wants everything to be just perfect. She has an infallible ear for what is funny, what will play, what will not play. And it's just a joy working with her, because I learn something every week, and I've been working with her for 9 seasons now, and it's just like going to a new and exciting endeavor every Monday when we start rehearsing a new show.
And because it seems that you enjoy your work as well.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And I don't, I'm sure you understand how many millions of people you must have entertained over the past 35-odd years in both radio and television. Do you ever contemplate how many millions of people have been entertained by you?
No, I've never thought of it in that way. I'm always concerned in, doing as good a job as I can. I hate to see myself on television, because I always think it's awful, and that I could have done much better if we'd had more time, and so forth and so on. But I never really stopped to consider how many people watch. I'm just very grateful if somebody happens to recognize me and says, well, we enjoyed this, or we thought this was funny, or that was funny. These things warm my heart very much, particularly young people. When kids come up and say that they enjoy it, then I know that when I blow up and I'm not being nasty, which is, it's very hard sometimes to know whether I've gone a little too far. But when I hear people say, well, it was amusing when you screamed to Lucy so-and-so and so-and-so, but they are not saying it in a resentful way, and that makes me feel very happy.
Well, you've been in good company tonight with the great Gildersleeve and the Green Hornet and Buffalo Bob Smith and Art Linkletter and Minerva Pius and Bob Hope. It's been a great night for me, and I'm
very flattered to be in such company, believe me.
Thank you very much. We'll be looking forward to seeing you very soon.
Well, thank you, and congratulations on your 50th anniversary.
Thank you, Gale Gordon.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Gale Gordon, ladies and gentlemen, of Armis Brooks, Fibber McGee, and Molly, and The Lucy Show, of course, here on WBZ, celebrating our 50th anniversary. Stand by. The following is brought to you by the Boston Globe.
Live and in person, hear and meet Art Buchwald, William F. Buckley, Dr. Paul Dudley White, Isaac Asimov, and a score of other top authors at the Boston Globe New England Book Festival, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd at the John B. Hines Auditorium, Boston. Other book festival highlights include prominent poets reading their own works throughout show hours, the exclusive Boston showing of award-winning movies from the American Film Festival, exciting displays of new fall books, valuable door prizes, and more. Next Sunday, September 26th, in the Boston Sunday Globe, see and read the big special book festival section, complete with features and scheduled for the 3-day festival. See and save the book festival section and make your plans to meet your favorite authors. Art Buchwald, William Buckley, Judge Robert Sullivan, Louis Lyons, Jan Yoors, Nicholas Gage, Victor Siroff, Eliza McCormick, and many, many more. All at the New England Book Festival, sponsored by the Boston Globe. And check your local library or participating bookseller for special reduced-rate admission coupons.
Boston WBZ. The Spirit of New England, WBZ, and WBZ FM Boston Group W Westinghouse Broadcasting. This is Jerry Williams, happy to preside this week over this 50th anniversary celebration on this program. All the boys, as you know, are down in Springfield at the Big E. Last night we talked to Jackson Beck, who was Superman's announcer on a million other radio programs, Jerry Colonna, Jimmy Wallington, who was in radio close to 50 years, Eddie Cantor's announcer, among others, Don Wilson, who's been in radio that long, Rudy Valley, who was one of the early entries into radio in 1928, Red Barber and Bill Stern, and Herb Morrison, who was the young gentleman at that time who described the Hindenburg air disaster. Tonight we've been talking to the great Gildersleeve, Green Hornet, Jack McCarthy, Santos Ortega, who played 10 or 12 different roles, including Nero Wolfe and Charlie Chan and Perry Mason. Buffalo Bob Smith and Howdy Doody, Art Linkletter, Kenny Delmar. I'm sorry we didn't make contact with him. William Conrad, who was Matt Dillon. We'll try to make contact with him on another night. Minerva Pius was with us. Bob Hope, Gale Gordon you just heard, and we're hoping to hear shortly from Harry Von Zell, who probably is one of the best known of all the radio announcers in radio during the golden days of the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and for that matter into the 60s and now the 70s. And we'll be back in a moment here on WBZ, and if you'd like to make a call or a comment on this kind of radio, we'd just be overwhelmed to hear from you with your reaction now at 254-5678.
Well, let's see now. I'll get these speakers and that amplifier, and this no, I can't get that amplifier. That's too strong. It'll blow the speakers out. But that's a beautiful turntable. I'll get the... look at the price. Woo, I can't afford that turntable. Let's see. Well, I'll get this amplifier, and that'll go with those two speakers. No, that wouldn't work at all. I'll just get the two... That's how I was when I decided to buy the component system I'd always wanted. Either the components weren't right for each other, or the prices were too high, or the places I went to really didn't have that much of a selection. I should have known. Leechmere, of course. Well, that's where I just came from. I just saved over $100 on a system that's just perfect for my needs. At Leechmere, all this week, you can get a Pioneer AM/FM 40-watt stereo receiver, a garage changer with dust cover, a Pickering cartridge, and 2 Quadrace air suspension speakers for only $239.88, and it lists for over $340. For your component system, go to Leechmere first, in Cambridge, Dedham, and Danvers.
For some time now, you've been hearing about a unique no-refusal life insurance plan for people in the upper age brackets from Life of America Insurance Corporation of Boston. Now here's great news for those of you who have turned 46. Yes, because of the high demand, Life of America has lowered its age requirements to 46 for life insurance coverage for as little as $6.95 a month. This is the same no-refusal insurance policy that thousands of persons 55 to 87 have taken advantage of. No physical exam, regardless of past medical history. No salesman will call, and if after receiving and reading your policy you decide it's not exactly what you want, return it within 30 days for a full premium refund. For this no-refusal life insurance, now for persons 46 to 87, write Insurance, WBZ, Boston 02134, or call 423-3360. Insurance, WBZ Boston 02134 or 423-3360. Now we'll take some calls from our listeners on BZ's 50th anniversary. Good evening. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Jerry Williams.
Jerry, how
yes,
are
sir.
you?
Good.
I'm from Watertown.
Yes, sir.
I got one question for you. Who played The Shadow? Do you know?
Lamont Cranston.
He did. No, I can remember. Well, I'm not too old. I'm 29, but I can remember some of the old programs on radio, the Lone Ranger and some of these. And I think the Lone Ranger went off in 60 sometime, didn't it?
I'm not sure when it went off. I know it was revived for a time. It's been on and off the air. And I'm not quite sure. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know the answers to all those trivia questions.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, I've enjoyed the last couple of nights. I've listened on and off, and it's really been great.
We're glad to hear from you, and thank you very much. Please don't ask me questions about old-time radio. The trivia questions, I don't know the answer. I mean, Larry Glick could have played Lamont Cranston. I don't know. 254-567, what was his name? Brett Morrison played the Shadow. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Oh, this is a terrible line. Harry, can we call you back at your number?
Do we have a bad line?
Yes, we do. I'm going to try to have... Yes, it is. I hear... Can we call you back? Is that possible?
Yes.
If we give you the number?
It is area code 714.
All right, will you hold just a minute, please, Harry? Just a second. Don't pump him off. Harry Von Zell. I didn't know it was Harry Von Zell, as a matter of fact, and we'll be back in a moment. Before you make any decision about new laundry equipment, Westinghouse says compare the Spacemates. Feature for feature with other space-saving washers and dryers. The Westinghouse Spacemates stack in only 27 inches of floor space and let you wash and dry at the same time. Both the washer and the dryer have a big 12-pound capacity, and Westinghouse tumble-action washing washes every item thoroughly, safely, and gently. The dryer has exclusive Westinghouse cross-vane tumbling that dries clothes by moving them back and forth while tumbling them over and over. Everything in the dryer receives the same amount of perfectly balanced heat. For added convenience, the dryer has an auto-call signal, a buzzer that sounds when clothes are completely dry. And your Westinghouse Spacemates are backed by 18 years of proven reliability. There's more you should know about the Spacemates. See your Westinghouse dealer. You'll be glad you did. You can be sure if it's Westinghouse. I wanted to make sure we have an absolutely clear line. That's down in Florida somewhere, Harry Von Zell. We'll try him now. Hello?
Hello.
Oh, much better, Harry. How are you?
Is this Jerry?
This is Jerry Williams. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine, and I want to wish you and your station a very, very happy anniversary.
50 years on the air. Does that date back, Harry, as far as your career does?
It's coming pretty close.
When is your 50th?
I beg your pardon?
When is your 50th?
It will be in about, I'd say another 3 years.
So you're pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
Yeah, the other night we talked to Jimmy Wallington, Don Wilson, and...
Well, Don Wilson and I think, are pretty close together. Jimmy is fairly close together. I know Don. Of course, I see Don all the time because we're out here in good old sunny Southern California. But Jimmy, I haven't seen in a number of years.
Yeah, Jimmy Wallington is with the Voice of America in Washington.
That I know.
And sounds good, and wanted to be remembered to you.
Oh, well, if you talk to him again, remember me to him, or him to me.
47 years ago, where did it all begin, Harry?
It began in Inglewood, California.
What station?
In about 1923 or 24.
What station was that?
KMIC.
And what did you do?
Well, I started, I was a singer. I was a vocalist, as they called us in those days. And, of course, in those early days, you did everything. If you had a program for a half hour or an hour, you not only did your thing, but you also announced your numbers, and you also sold the sponsors, whoever they were. And this led eventually to my getting an offer to take a job at the station. And that put me into the business. And it grew from there. I went from that station to a larger station, and then a larger station. And then I went eventually to the Columbia Network. And
I wonder in those days, how did they discover Harry Von Zell was needed by the Columbia Broadcasting System?
Well, that came about when the Paul Whiteman King of Jazz Orchestra got an opportunity with Universal Pictures to do a musical called The King of Jazz. And it would require them to be on the West Coast for about 2 years. At that time, the Whiteman Orchestra had the can you make commercials on this, Jerry?
Sure.
They had the Old Gold Hour, one of the first big musical hours on network radio. And their announcer was Ted Husing, whom surely you remember.
Yes.
One of the greats of all time.
As a matter of fact, last night we spoke to Bill Stern, who recalled with great nostalgia that he was influenced greatly by Ted Husing.
Yes, yes. Well, they made quite a thing out of trying to find a replacement for Ted Husing to announce the Old Gold program, because Ted, his interest was primarily in sports at that time, and he, of course, had commitments that he had to fill, and there was no way that he could stay on the West Coast for 2 years, and they made a cross-country tour where they auditioned people from city to city to replace Ted Husing, and when they got to the West Coast, they were running out of time, and the man I was working for at that time said that I had to go up and audition for that or I would get fired, and I did, and as they were running out of time, I got the job. And that led to my finally going back to New York with the Columbia Network.
That was the big time.
That was the big time.
What did the big time pay at that time?
Well, I remember that I had been working for the Columbia Network for about 2 months when somebody wrote an article. I think it was published in Liberty magazine, which is now no longer in existence, hasn't been for a number of years. And in the article, it was the subject was the fortunes that were being made in this great new medium of radio. And I was named in there as one of those, earning fantastical sums of money. I think my income was reported as being around $75,000 to $100,000 a year. I was making $60 a week.
The networks were not known to be too generous at that time.
Well, they actually at that time they were generous, but
not with you.
Well, and I wasn't the only one. There were others, but the rewards came.
Now, what programs did you go on to do, Harry?
Well, there are so many. I think the thing that
name a few hundred.
The first thing that was of the greatest importance for me was the March of Time series. This was the introduction of Time magazine to the public, and it was an innovation in radio, as it was a unique dramatization of the news on a weekly summary basis, and they needed a voice of time, and they needed the voice of fate, and I was selected to do the voice of time. And that program achieved such public reaction and such public acclaim that reflected upon me and really got me off to a big start. I think the next thing was the Admiral Byrd expedition to Little America, on which I handled the communication from the stateside end and did the reporting and commentary of whatever was happening down in Little America during the week that we were covering. It was a Friday night program, and we summarized all of the significant events that had occurred in the Byrd expedition. Now, in the entertainment, it was strictly entertainment rather than the documentary. The associations with such people as Fred Allen and Eddie Cantor and Jack Benny and Ed Wynn and Kate Smith Well, all I can say is that I have probably been the most fortunate man in the world, just through association.
Did you really do that to Herbert Hoover?
Yes, Heber Herbert, I did that.
You did that?
I didn't do it on purpose, Jerry. This
everybody...
came also very early in my career, and when it happened, I was convinced that it was the end of whatever career there might have been. But it turned out to be... It made me... Well, you can use the word famous, notorious, or infamous, either way you want to put it. But this was a case of a very young man with a great opportunity that was entirely unexpected, and I was so terribly nervous that the 7-minute introduction to a 2-hour program dedicated to the president of that time, I was so scared that I did the whole thing perfectly until I came down to the very end when I blew the president's name. I had said it 20 times during the 7 minutes, tracing his life. Herbert Hoover, the qualities of leadership that he evidenced as a very young man in high school, and then in college, and then as a young man in business and in the scientific fields of engineering and economics. And I had said his name 20 times, but when I had gone through all of that and I didn't get a frog in my throat, I didn't miss a syllable, did everything perfectly, and then I relaxed and my tongue turned into a rope, and I couldn't say his name. I tried to say Herbert Hoover again, but it came out Heber, Hoover, and I kicked it around for 15 seconds and then practically fainted.
What reaction did you receive to that, other than that it's become one of the famous bloopers of all time?
At the time, the reaction was very compassionate. Everybody felt sorry for me.
I think in those days it was really forbidden to make any sort of an error. Today it's much more relaxed, as you know.
Oh, yes. In those days, you were never supposed to make a mistake. If you got a frog in your throat, they'd call you in and say, "What's the matter with you? Don't you know how to talk?" And everything, they gave diction awards, whatever those were. You had to have a certain voice quality.
Oh, yes, they were that was the era of all the golden-throated announcers.
Yes, well, of course, all of that was, I think rather frivolous. Some of the greatest announcers we ever had. Norman Brokenshire did not have a golden voice.
But David Ross did.
And David Ross had a golden voice, and he literally sang when he spoke.
Uh-huh. And Milton Cross.
Milton Cross was another. John Daniels, who was even earlier than the others we have just mentioned.
Andre Baruch.
Andre Baruch didn't have great voice, but he had fluidity.
And I don't think that Ben Grauer had what you might call but great voice, but he had an authoritative sound.
That's right. And he was articulate, and he carried conviction because there was conviction there. And since then, we have had I don't know how many people that if you were going to evaluate them as speech perfectionists, forget it. If you were going to say that their voices were of a melodic or beautiful quality, you had to forget that too. But they carried conviction. They were individualistic. They were people. And these people became very great. Paul Douglas, who later, went into the theater and into motion pictures. There are just any number of them that you by the early standards of the networks, you would have wondered how they got their jobs. As a matter of fact, I flunked my audition at CBS when I went back there because they had 4 pages. One of English, but very uncommonly used words, 4 and 5 syllable words. and then a page of French, German, Russian, not necessarily full language, but names of places and people. And I just, when they handed me the paper, I put it back to them and said, I couldn't pass this. I have trouble speaking English. But if you'll give me a program, I don't care what kind of a program, give me a program to announce, and I think I can make it. And they finally did that, and I made it. They gave me Emery Deutsch and his Hungarian Gypsies.
Not a bad program.
And most of it was all Hungarian. And I managed to mugger through.
Mm-hmm. They weren't the A&P Gypsies, were they?
No, the A&P Gypsies, they came even before Emery Deutsch and his Hungarian Gypsies.
Well, were there any other great goofs like the Hebert Hoover one or the Hoover, whatever it was?
Well, no, not. I don't think I made any goofs that would compare to Hebert Hoover. I think one of the most interesting ones. Excuse me, just a minute, Jerry.
Sure.
I've been making speeches for two weeks, and my voice is a little bit hoarse.
Yeah, where are you?
I'm up at Lake Arrowhead.
Which is on the West Coast somewhere?
Yes, the Lake Arrowhead is located in the San Bernardino Mountains.
I see.
Not far from, well, it's maybe 90 miles from Palm Springs, and in the other direction, another little more than 90 miles to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about the great goofs again.
Yes, this was, it was the circumstances of it. I don't remember. Do you remember Howard Claney?
No, I don't think I do.
Well, Howard Claney was one of the classic announcers at NBC. And NBC had arranged for the first time to attempt a shortwave broadcast of the Easter address of the Pope from the Vatican in Rome. And full production, a full morning of religious music with the Philharmonic Orchestra, the Metropolitan Opera Chorus, and soloists. And it was the most impressive 2 hours that you could possibly imagine. I happened to be fortunate enough to be off schedule that morning, and I was at home and I listened to it. And there were 2 hours of the most beautiful music. And then came time when they were going to switch over and pick up the Easter address of Pope Pius V from the Vatican in Rome. And then this beautiful mood that had been established by the music faded down, the chorus, the orchestra, and about 3 or 4 seconds of appropriate silence, and then this mellifluous voice of Howard Claney. Ladies and gentlemen, the next voice you will hear speaking to you directly from the Vatican in Rome. Pi Popus Pi Popus.
You know, it's still funny today.
Well, it was not funny to Howard.
Oh, I'll bet.
Howard, following that incident, as I remember, I think he took a sabbatical and went to Paris to study art. And after a year or so came back to resume his announcing chores. And he also became a very fine artist, incidentally.
I thought he might have disappeared like Amelia Earhart.
No.
Now, I'm going to take a 1-minute break. Will you stand by, please, Harry?
Yes.
Harry Von Zell, ladies and gentlemen. We're pleased to interrupt the Chevrolet garage sale for a tax reduction. Your Chevy dealer has been having that garage sale to clean out his stock of 1971 Chevrolets at clearance prices. Well, the president has asked for repeal of the 7% excise tax on autos, effective August 15th. If the tax is repealed, the full amount will be refunded to buyers of 1971 Chevrolets purchased after August 15th. Depending upon the model selected, this means an extra savings of up to $200, which will be refunded directly to buyers by Chevrolet. Your Chevrolet dealer was having a garage sale, and you could get a great year-end deal on any new Chevrolet and all the other great 71 models your Chevy dealer has in stock. Now, on top of that, a possible extra savings with a proposed excise tax rebate, a proposed tax refund, and a garage sale at your Chevrolet dealer. 5 minutes to midnight, Harry Von Zell is with us on our 50th anniversary.
Command Performance, USA. Presented this week and every week till it's over there. Okay there, gang. This is Harry Von Zell reminding you that it's time to join us once again for another session dedicated to answering your requests to Command Performance, Armed Forces Radio, Los Angeles, USA. Now, it's come to our attention that a lot of you guys have been reading comic books while our shows are on. Now, we realize that you men and women in the Army, Navy, Coast Guard, and Marines can do exactly as you please at any time. But Command Performance hates to lose any listener. So for you guys who like comic strips, tonight we're going to devote our entire time to a real super-duper two-fisted He-Man thriller, Dick Tracy. Ready, Maestro. Overture.
Harry, we thought we'd throw that one at you.
You are now talking to a man with tears in his eyes.
What year was that?
Oh, it had to be...
Wartime.
Oh, yes. 25 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And, Jerry, there are so many bright memories. And I think I'm getting to the age where sentimentalism moves me. Nostalgia moves me very greatly. But I can tell you this about radio. And I think it has significance because here your station is celebrating 50 years of service to the public. Of radio, I think this. There has never been a medium which broadened and brightened the lives of as many millions of people as this medium over which we are speaking now. It called upon the imaginative powers of millions of people living in areas separated. Well, I'm talking about the rural areas of our country and of other great countries. And this medium could bring the whole world to them. But it brought it to them in their own mind's eye, purely through sound, through voices, through music, and, of course, the ever-loving sound effects men and the special effects men. And to me, there will never be a medium as powerful and as meaningful in terms of contributing to the lives of people as this medium that we're talking over now.
Harry, what are you doing today?
Well, today, here again, I'm the most fortunate man in the world. I thought I had retired some years ago following the Burns and Allen television series. But an opportunity arose which has resulted in my becoming the radio, television, and public representative of the largest savings and loan association in America. Nobody outside of the western section of the country knows about that because we operate solely in this area of the country. But it's a fine institution. I'm doing what makes me very happy. I'm back where I belong, and I feel that I'm rendering a service to a lot of people.
You'll be in competition with two others we spoke to tonight, Hal Perry and Art Linkletter as well.
Art Linkletter and Hal, yes. We don't consider ourselves competitors. We are colleagues because we are all rendering a public service.
It's a joy to talk to you. Really, I've enjoyed it, and your mellifluous tones are much the same as they always have been.
Well, as I say, I've done 3 county fairs, which are big things out here in the West, in the last 2 weeks. Just day before yesterday, I worked for 4.5 hours before an audience of 1,500 people, just trying to make them happy. But the old voice, the vocal cords are like any muscle in the body. They get strained sometimes.
Oh, you sound great tonight.
Does it come over well?
Oh, yes, you sound just great.
Oh, I wish you could keep me on another hour.
I wish I could. I really do. But you sound just great. And as a matter of fact, the people I've talked to, those from those days, the Jimmy Wallingtons and the Don Wilsons and the Bill Stearns and the Red Barbers, really sound much the same as they did in those days. Hal Perry, the great Gildersleeve, doesn't sound one iota different.
No way. No, and he never will. No, but if you could see Hal today, he doesn't look any different. He isn't any different than he was many, many years ago.
Just preceding the conversation with you, Harry, we spoke to Gale Gordon, who sounds much like, of course, we see him every day on television.
Yeah.
But much like he sounded in the days of Armis Brooks.
Well, this is because we're fortunate people. We're active. We're doing things that we like to do, and age doesn't mean anything really. If you ask me right now how old I'm not sure I could tell you because I don't know.
Well, the only person I've asked that was just a little while ago, and it was Bob Hope, and he admitted to 78 or so around that period.
Bob Hope?
Yes.
Oh, he was fibbing. He's not that old.
He said Jerry Colonna was a little older.
When people ask me how old I am, I said, well, since Jack Benny finally gave it up, I've taken over 39.
Well, it's just delightful to talk to you. Thank you very much. You've contributed a great deal to our 50th anniversary.
Well, I hope so, Jerry, and I do appreciate you giving me this much time.
Thank you very much, Harry.
Righto.
Good night.
Good night.
Harry Von Zell of the Golden Days of Radio here on WBZ and WBZ FM Boston, Group W Westinghouse Broadcasting. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to give it back to Maurice Lewis and then Larry Glick. They're looking at you're angry about the 2 minutes? Maurice Lewis, I'm going to give you one. I mean, if you've been in radio 50 years, you'd give a guy 2 more minutes, wouldn't you? Right. He was in radio 47 years. You weren't even born then. And I wasn't even born. Well, I was almost born. My birthday's Friday night. Friday night? It's my birthday, Friday night. 26 years in radio. 26 years. Well, one gets some of these great stars of the radio past days. Why, 26 years doesn't look like very much. We'll take this message. Maurice Lewis is standing by with news. Larry Glick with fun and entertainment through the night. Who knows, he's going to talk to some great stars tonight. He is lined up, but let's see. Phil Nardella. Some of the other great stars. Roger Krill. Sam Blitz. Oh, some of the great stars. Incidentally, this program was produced tonight and all week long by Kenny Meyer, who's done a fantastic job of lining up all of these people around the country. Tomorrow night, Helen Trent, Julie Underhill. Whatever happened in Helen Trent. Penny Singleton, who played Blondie. Dan McLaughlin, who played Counter Spy, and Stella Dallas. A lot of these soap opera people will be on for just short periods of time. Jay Jostin, Mr. District Attorney. Mel Blanc, the voice of Bugs Bunny and a million different characters. And in our studios, live and in person, Racing with the Moon, Vaughn Monroe. Wow. Milton Berle is going to be with us this coming week. Howard K. Smith, Robert Q. Lewis, Ken Carpenter. Who knows? Who knows? We may even whip up Carl DeSuze. Friday night will be local radio night, and Carl will be here. Streeter Stewart, Art Gardner, Sherm Feller, a whole flock of old-time radio people to remember the old times in Boston. Now this.
Flair writes smooth.
Flair is tough.
Flair, 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 Flair. Ooh, Flair writes smooth.
Flair is tough.
Flair, Flair, Flair.
Get into show business with Flair, the pen that shows exactly how you feel. Because Flair comes filled with more than ink. Flair comes filled with love, joy, happiness, fun. Old-fashioned pens write words. Flair writes feelings. Flair, now playing at your favorite store with a cast of 12 emotionally involved colors.
Ooh, Flair writes smooth.
Flair is is tough.
Flair, Flair, Flair. With the smooth,
Tough.
nylon point, it's the only way to write. Flair, Flair, Flair.
Patriots fans, avoid expensive parking and ride in comfort to the league-leading Patriots game with the Detroit Lions. This Sunday, the Plantation Beef Steakhouse in Braintree has this exciting offer. Take a bus from the Plantation in the South Shore Plaza. Avoid the traffic hassle. The price is an incredibly low $6. In addition to the bus ride, you will receive $5 worth of food and beverages